In this video, I will present an argument that will derive moral ought conclusions from purely factual premises. David Hume famously argued that this could not be done. However, Hume never actually provided an argument. He just said that he found it inconceivable, and there's no law of logic that says that what Hume cannot conceive of is impossible. However, the best way to show that something is possible is to do it. This isn't going to be as strange as some may think. It's widely accepted that Hume's law, as this claim is called, applies to categorical imperatives and not hypothetical imperatives. A hypothetical imperative depends on wants or desires. If you want to get to the movie before it starts, you should leave now. Categorical imperatives are independent of desires. You are morally obligated to keep your promise whether you want to or not. When I derive moral conclusion from factual premises, the form of my argument will make the moral conclusion a hypothetical imperative, one that depends on desires, though, importantly, not on the desires of the person performing the action. So it'll still be true that you ought to keep your promise whether you want to or not. So let me start by going into a little more detail about this difference between hypothetical and categorical imperatives. Hypothetical imperatives, as I said, depend on desires. An argument from is to ought, in the case of a hypothetical imperative, begins with one or more desires in the premises. So I'm going to create an argument beginning with the assumption that you have an aversion to pain. We're going to add to this a simple fact about the world. If you put your hand on a hot stove, on a very hot stove, then you will feel pain. From this, we get the conclusion, an imperative. You shouldn't put your hand on a hot stove. These types of inferences are a part of our everyday lives. If you want bread with supper, then you should stop by the store on the way home and buy some. If you want to catch your plane, you should arrive at the airport 2 hours early. If you want to lose weight, then you should exercise more and eat less. There's nothing mystical or magical about these inferences. However, these clearly are not moral claims. It would also be the case that if you want to make sure that the witness doesn't testify against you, then you should murder the witness. And if you want to hear Jimmy scream in pain, then you should, well, there's quite a few options. These are also examples of hypothetical imperatives. All of these imperatives say that if you perform the act recommended in the conclusion, the imperative, then you satisfy the desires that appear in the premises. A common view is that moral imperatives are not hypothetical imperatives, they're categorical imperatives. A categorical imperative tells you what to do regardless of what you desire. You should not murder the witnesses. You should not do whatever might be done to make Jimmy scream in pain, and it doesn't matter what you want. It would be wrong to do it. So basically, you can derive hypothetical ought statements from factual premises so long as a premise is one or more desires, and the conclusion is that some act is such as to satisfy those desires. You can't derive categorical ought conclusions in this way because they're independent of desires. That's the standard view. So what's my view? I'm going to argue that moral imperatives are not categorical imperatives. They're a special kind of hypothetical imperative. There's more than one way to relate an action to a set of desires. This means that my argument is going to have to look like the argument for a hypothetical imperative. Its premises will include a set of desires. The argument will include a set of relevant facts about the world. And the argument will conclude with an ought conclusion, where the act described in the conclusion is such as to satisfy the desires that appear in the premises. Though importantly, the desires in the premises will not be the desires of the person performing the action. So we begin with one or more desires. I will begin with just one desire, and I'll be adding others later. We'll start with an agent that has a desire that he. We could, for example, start with me and my desire that I am not in pain, or with you and your desire that you are not in pain, or some hypothetical person and that hypothetical person's desire that they are not in pain. This aversion to pain is a biological fact. I've evolved in such a way that certain changes to my skin, for example, send a signal to my brain, which is wired in such a way that it sends an urgent command to make it stop. Better yet is the command in my brain to prevent it from starting in the first place. All desires are biological facts. They are a product of the way that the neurons in the brain process input and produce output. Just to make this presentation easier to understand, let us give our hypothetical agent a clever name. Let's call this person Agent. That's about as clever as I can get. Agent has a desire that P. For example, agent has a desire that agent not be in pain. Agent's aversion to pain gives the agent a reason to do things to make it the case that the agent is not in pain. My aversion to pain gives me a reason not to put my hand on a hot stove. We may assume that agent has a reason not to put their hand on a hot stove either. A more general and more formal way of saying this is to say agent's desire that P gives agent a reason to act so as to make or keep P true. Agent's desire that agent is not in pain gives agent a reason to act so as to make or keep agent is not in pain true. Unfortunately, agent's aversion to his own pain doesn't give anybody else a reason to avoid causing agent to be in pain. Desires provide reasons only to the person with that desire. Among animals, the antelope's aversion to pain does not give the lion a reason not to kill and eat it. And the lion's hunger doesn't give the antelope a reason to stand still and be eaten. Each creature's reasons are their own. In the philosophical literature, it's common to say that if doing something is wrong, then people have a reason not to do it. So, it is wrong to torture babies implies that everybody has a reason not to torture babies. Or, it's wrong to douse a cat in gasoline and set it on fire for amusement implies that everybody has a reason not to douse a cat with gasoline and set it on fire for amusement. I deny that this is true. In the same way that the lion has no reason not to kill and eat the antelope, it's not necessary that every human, or any human for that matter, has a reason not to torture babies. I can state this more directly. I have an aversion to pain. I deny that this implies that others have a reason not to torture me. I would hope that they have a reason not to torture me, but hoping doesn't make it true. However, and this is important, this is the vital fact that people tend to overlook. My aversion to pain does give me a reason to make it the case that others have a reason not to torture me, if I can. Or in the case of our agent, agent's aversion to pain gives agent a reason to make it the case that others have reasons not to do things that could cause agent to be in pain. This reason that agent has to give others reasons not to do certain things isn't relevantly different from agent's reason not to put their hand on a hot stove. Both come from the agent's desire not to be in pain and seek to keep it true that agent is not in pain. Now I'm going to add what philosophers call the Humean theory of reasons, since it's attributed to, or at least inspired by, David Hume. This states that to have a reason to do something, one must have a desire that is served by doing it. Okay, let me give myself some room here to continue. I've said that agent's desire that P gives agent a reason to give others reasons to act in ways that will make or keep P true. Agent's aversion to pain gives agent a reason to give others reasons not to perform types of actions that could result in agent being in pain. And I'm combining this with the Humean theory of reasons that says that to have a reason to do something, or not do something, is to have a desire that would be served by doing it, or not doing it, respectively. And this means that to give others a reason not to do something that could cause one to be in pain means making it the case that others have desires that would be served by not doing something that could cause one to be in pain. Here, for the sake of illustration, let me just postulate a hypothetical act. Let us assume that there's a type of act that we will call fying that tends to make or keep P false. For example, throwing acid on somebody would tend to make it the case that I am not in pain, spoken by the person soaked in acid, false. Agent, with a desire to not be in pain, has a reason to cause others to have a reason not to throw acid on people. Now, technically, agent only has a reason to cause others to have a reason not to throw acid on agent, but let's assume that it would be a lot easier to create a reason not to throw acid on anybody. To create a reason not to throw acid on people, agent gives them a desire that would be served by not throwing acid on people, such as an aversion to throwing acid on people. So now, agent needs to figure out how to give others an aversion to throwing acid on people. Agent's options fall into two general categories. Category 1. Agent can create new links between the desires other people have and the act of throwing acid on somebody. Here's an option. Threaten to throw acid on anybody who throws acid on another person and see how they like it. Another option would be to offer to pay $100 to anybody who hasn't thrown acid on anybody at the end of each month. These are the options of incentive and deterrence. I'm going to assign these tools to the realms of markets and laws and set them aside. The realm of morality, I'm going to argue, concerns the second way in which agent can give others a reason not to throw acid on people. Category 2 is to create new desires and aversions that would be served by not throwing acid on people. I've given an example of this above. Give people an aversion to throwing acid on people. Somebody with an aversion to throwing acid on people has a reason not to throw acid on people, just as a person with an aversion of pain has a reason not to put their hand on a hot stove. Another option, when their promise is to be a lot better, would be to give others an aversion to causing pain. This would not only cover throwing acid, but a number of other possible ways in which one person can cause another to be in pain. I'd argue that this is the option we actually tend to go for. However, it's a bit too general to illustrate the points that I want to illustrate, so I'm going to stay with my more narrow option. I'm sorry, but I need to put this in a bit more formal and general language. Agent's desire that P provides agent with a reason to cause others to have desires and aversions that would be served by actions that make or keep P true. If fying is an act that tends to make or keep P false, then agent has a reason to give others a reason not to fy. And one way to do this is to give other agents desires and aversions that would be fulfilled by the agent not fying. It's still true that agent can use the options of incentive and deterrence. Agent has a reason to make it illegal to throw acid on people and punish the lawbreakers. Creating an aversion to throwing acid on people, or more generally, creating an aversion to causing pain, is not the only option, but it is an option. And it has a significant advantage over incentive and deterrence. It works even when the agent can avoid getting caught. So now, agent has to create these desires and aversions that would give other people reasons not to fy. How is the agent going to do this? It's well known that desires and aversions are shaped, at least in part, by experience. So, to give others the relevant desires and aversions means creating the experiences that will produce or reinforce those desires and aversions. Among the experiences that shape people's desires and aversions are the experiences of praise and condemnation, expressions of approval and disapproval. So agent, with a desire that P, has reasons to use praise and condemnation to create or reinforce in others those desires and aversions that will give them reasons not to fy, where fying tends to make or keep P false. Agent, with an aversion to pain, has a reason to use praise and condemnation to give others an aversion to performing acts like throwing acid on people that tend to cause pain to others. It's still the case that agents' reasons to use praise and condemnation are no different from agents' reasons not to put their hand on a hot stove. We've still not introduced anything mystical or magical into this argument. This is not morality yet. We still have some distance to go, but we're getting close. Agent also has reasons to use praise and condemnation to give others reasons to give agent all their money and to obey agent's every command. But these are not moral requirements. The next step is to put agent in a community where each has their own desires. For example, let us assume that almost everybody has an aversion to their own pain. If fying is the type of act that tends to cause others to be in pain, we have a community where almost everybody has a reason to give each other a reason not to fy. We can see that in the real world, there are a lot of act types that fit this description. People generally have lots of reasons to use condemnation to give everybody an aversion to breaking promises, defrauding others, vandalizing or taking property without consent, drunk driving, assault, rape, murder, slavery, genocide. These are all act types that nearly everybody has reasons to condemn so that we can make people reluctant to participate in these types of acts. Not only is it the case that each of us has reasons to condemn these types of actions, each of us has reasons to solicit help from others in condemning these types of actions. We can start to solicit this help by pointing out to others, as I am doing here to you, that we all have reasons to make each other reluctant to perform acts of these types. But we can also use praise and condemnation to reinforce those reasons, and we have reasons to do so. I would argue that it's not a coincidence that the set of actions that fit this description are those actions that we call wrong or immoral. To say that an act of a particular type is wrong is to say that virtually everybody has reasons to use condemnation to create and reinforce in each other an aversion to performing acts of that type. This then follows the requirements for a hypothetical imperative. To say that an act is wrong is to say that people generally have reasons to condemn those who perform acts of that type, and that those reasons come from their desires. To say that you morally ought to keep your promise, even when you don't want to, is to say that others have reasons to condemn those who break their promises in that type of situation. It's still a hypothetical imperative. However, this imperative covers what people generally ought to condemn, or in some cases to praise. And what others have reasons to praise or condemn is substantially independent of the desires of the person who is to be praised or condemned. We conclude with the hypothetical imperative that people generally ought to be praising or condemning those who perform acts of a particular type, where acts of that type include such things as breaking promises, vandalism, rape, slavery. Some might not want to use the term wrong to refer to types of actions that people generally have reasons to condemn, but that doesn't matter. When Pluto ceased to be a planet, this did not change its orbit, its size, or its chemical composition. It was still the same thing. It just had a different name. Similarly, it doesn't matter what we call act types that people generally have reasons to condemn, such as theft, rape, and murder. They are still act types that people generally have reasons to condemn. Now that we have this argument at our disposal, we can ask about other types of actions. Is abortion an act type that people generally have reasons to condemn? I can say that abortion is not an act type that an undeveloped fetus would have reasons to condemn. To have a reason to condemn something, one must have desires that would be served by condemning it. And a fetus, until late in its development, has no such desires. Is capital punishment an act type that people generally have reasons to condemn? Well, capital punishment involves the intentional killing of a person with reasons not to be killed. We may well be more successful in reducing murders if we promote a much stronger aversion to killing people who have reasons not to be killed. Are homosexual acts an act type that people generally have reasons to condemn? We have no reasons to doubt that they satisfy the desires of the people in those relationships, and thwart no desires except the aversion to people having homosexual relationships. It is this aversion to people having those relationships that tends to cause harm, not the relationships themselves. So we have more reason to condemn the aversion than to condemn the relationships. So in summary, in this argument, the nearly universal condemnation of those who phi is justified on the grounds that nearly everybody has desire-dependent reasons to not only condemn those who phi, but to support each other in the condemnation of those who phi. Doing so is such as to satisfy the desires that provide the reasons for the condemnation. And there is nothing mysterious or magical in this argument. The reasons to condemn those who phi are no more mysterious than the reasons not to put one's hand on a hot stove. Such reasons exist, and there are some act types, call them phi-type acts, that nearly everybody does have reasons to condemn. Questions, comments, criticisms? Let me know.